I'd like to open up the floor from show of hands, if anyone has any questions for the panelists. Yes, go ahead. Or comments? Yes. Sorry, can you please use the microphone and introduce yourself, please?
For Dr. Bernard, I'm assuming your idea of creating a brand new form of energy or a brand new type of grid in underdeveloped countries is going to be easier because there is no grid now. And then if the developed world then sees that, are we going to have to change our grids to make them more efficient?
I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel. I think there are some unique opportunities that are already in place. We always talk about poverty reduction, and my colleague Hunter Lovins will tell you about wealth enhancement. I will start with wealth enhancement. There are some essentially sources of energy at the local level. There's talent, there's know-how, and the idea is to capitalize on that know-how, more bottom-up approach at the same time that can merge with the top-down approach. And I think there's a lot of local talent and unused, essentially, human potential and creativity that has not been used in the past, always assuming that the white man has the solution for the entire planet. Well, it's about time that we get out of that mindset.
Please.
Dr. Amadei. How is the Engineers Without Borders funded? I understand these are university teams that go out to rural areas. Is there a central fund that funds this project, or does each team look for its own funding? And what do you envision in the future if you see any changes?
Both. Actually, we have funding coming to the mother organization, to the headquarters, and we have essentially large donations coming from large engineering companies like Boeing, for instance, gave us a large donation. And essentially each chapter is somewhat dependent in the sense that they have to raise their own money. But again, keep in mind that we are dealing with small amounts of money here. We're not talking about millions of dollars to conduct a project. Again, I'm talking about small-scale projects. I don't want to give the impression that, all projects in the world are $25,000, right? There's also a limit to what you can do for $25,000. But there's a lot that can be done with $25,000 to $50,000. And it's easy for universities today, easy at least, some more than others, to raise that kind of funding and to develop essentially, to integrate even this kind of work into engineering education. And it needs it very much.
Right there.
Thank you. Richard Jordan, incoming Secretary of the NGO DPI Executive Committee here at headquarters. Thanks to all of the presenters. With a question for Mr. Barnes. Does the energy line take into account, especially in Bangladesh, the lack of consistent energy supply? You know that when you sit in Dhaka and your ceiling fan starts to whir and go off and your computer screen goes blank, you don't know how long the energy will be, the electricity will be off for. And secondly, you promised us your email address on a slide, but the technician removed the slide very quickly, so we really didn't have that. If you could perhaps give that to us or have the technician put that up, thank you.
Yes, the email is Barnes, as in the last name, B-A-R-N-E-S, and then D-F at gmail.com. So I still do have an email at the bank, but at the World Bank, but I never look at it anymore, so you won't reach me there. So the question was, did we look at consistency of supply? And we did look at consistency of supply in the surveys, and to a certain extent we did model it into our statistical models. But the main thing that really came out in the statistical models was, was the economic factors such as the education and the income and the pricing and so forth. So so the interesting part about defining it in this way is that we're defining it based on the policies in the country. So we're actually doing a second attempt at this to look at the poverty line in India, because we have a very high quality, pretty high quality data set in India, and we're coming out with fairly similar numbers to the Bangladesh work. So as we expand going forward, we'll probably make adjustments. One of the ideas is to look at rather than total energy, is to look at efficient energy. In other words, fuel wood consumption is with the three-stone stove is only 15% of total. So rather than, because if you look in urban areas, that typically the energy consumption is lower in urban than in rural because of the efficiency factor. So we're making some adjustments as we go along, but hopefully this can be eventually rolled out and be a good way to measure progress on energy issues. And I'll just say one thing about that. You know, I was one of the first people to calculate how many in the world had electricity. We came up with 2 billion people in 1996, and we're down to about, with population growth and everything, we're down to about 1.6 billion or 1.5 billion people today. So there has been progress made, not all because of the international banks or the donors, but because of the countries themselves. And so I think having these figures as benchmarks that we can measure ourselves by is a good practice, because then people can see that you're actually, their investments are actually helping and making progress.
Please.
Oswald from George Mason University and Innovations Journal. I wanted to ask a question about the intersection of energy, technology, and politics. Dr. Amadei, first of all, thank you for an outstanding presentation. And thinking about your remark that the problems aren't fundamentally technological, they are something else. There is a bias in energy technologies from the standpoint of the accumulation of wealth, and is a consequence of rent-seeking behavior, to the extraction of non-renewables. The sort of solutions that you're describing don't create a lot of opportunities for rent-seeking, whereas natural resource extraction does. And in the United States, as elsewhere in the world, the extractors of non-renewables have the possibility to influence political outcomes. So my question is, to what extent is the pathway that you're describing one in which governments at the national scale are as likely to be an obstacle as they are to be a solution? And if that is the case, what sort of strategies would we most desirably pursue in order to get the resources to the people who actually have the incentives and the capabilities to implement the solutions that will actually work for people who are in need, rather than to divert resources and to continue the accumulation of resources from those who already have great wealth, and furthermore, whose economic activities are detrimental to the climate and to the environment?
So I think, Bernard, you can take a first pass.
Yeah,
And
that's,
I think, Michael, if you wouldn't mind as well.
That's somewhat of a question. I'm an engineer, so I'll try to answer. But you were talking about, in my opinion, special interest, obviously, in keeping the system going. Not only we have the special interests, obviously, from the governments, but we also have special interest in keeping the market the way it is. I read from one of the articles, I think it might be in your article, that fuel wood and charcoal production in Africa is a $5 billion market, employing 400,000 people. So again, I don't think that market wants to let go